as it affects the so-called personal liberties, and for me it's a little difficult to even break things into economic and personal liberty. I see liberty as a unified whole, but I understand the conceptual bifurcation. So for these purposes, let's talk about the personal liberties. Well, hundreds of years ago in medieval England, a legal procedure called habeas corpus was born. Now, interestingly, habeas was not born as this great individualist principle. There was this individualist principle against unjust detention in the Magna Carta and in many other legal theories, but it wasn't habeas corpus's role in the beginning to secure liberty exactly. It was more of a jurisdictional power play where some courts would use it to bring forth prisoners of other courts, largely to collect court fees. It was very cynical at first, as many of our traditions are, but eventually what grew out of the king's own courts was turned against the king by parliament. And in America, this principle became even more individualist in the colonies as they demanded habeas corpus as a way to guarantee the rights of the individual. And this is important and vital in every way. I mean, the idea that you can't just stick someone in a cage without some reason or something approaching a reason. The idea that unjust imprisonment is very wrong. I mean, we all hear about crimes against the state, society, crimes against other private individuals. I wouldn't lump these all together, but this is something most people think about and find very important. But what about the crime of the state putting someone in a cage that shouldn't be in a cage? I mean, for the individual, this is totalitarianism. For the individual involved, this is a great evil. I would paraphrase Augustine and say that a greater good that relies on unjust imprisonment is no greater good at all. So recently, though, we've seen this principle turned on its head once again. It's now the executive's prerogative once again. Alberto Gonzalez says there's no right to habeas corpus in the Constitution, and so forth. And you know, it's very brazen that they would take this position so openly. And it's unfortunate there's not much more outrage. Of course, if we really want to understand the dignity of the individual being totally cast aside in these detentions, it's very important to confront earnestly the torture state. I mean, torture. It's almost, you know, I grew up not that long ago thinking that torture was kind of the very embodiment of evil. You know, you don't torture people. You got someone detained, and you're gonna ruin, you know, destroy their mind and do all sorts of cruel, savage things to their bodies. You know, to borrow Ayn Rand's term, savage. But seriously, this is disgusting practice, and it's become a talking point. You know, of course, in the Republican debates, you get applause in proportion to how much you praise and promote torture. This is a terrible development in our culture. It's very corrupting in every way. And incidentally, as far as the greater good is concerned, I mean, some of the most important pre-Iraq War intelligence, if we want to call it that was cited by Colin Powell that helped push many people over the edge to supporting the war. It came from torture. And it was, so what greater good could offset a war that's so bad that, you know, that almost, you know, even half the Republicans now are distancing themselves from it. This is a very unpopular war now. It's obviously not to anyone's greater good, and it came from torture. This very idea of weighing national security against individual liberty, this is an egregious error, because there's no security if the state can round you up, throw you in a cage, torture you, force you to fight. Why? The idea you're fighting for freedom by totally surrendering it seems to be in vogue these days, but it's a totally mistaken idea. This that we need to balance civil liberties. We need to do no such thing. But as bad as all of this is, including torture, where war and empire really attack the individual is in the war itself. I mean, first of all, we've got, what they call nation building, but it's really nation wrecking or whatnot. But the idea that the U.S. can create nations abroad and, create free institutions and build public works, it seems like if the conservatives really believe this, why would they oppose the government doing this at home if it could do it abroad? So, on an economics level, individualism is thrown aside in war. But ethically, I mean, what is war? What's bombing? This is, somewhat controversial even in anti-war circles, but bombing strikes me as among the most barbaric practices in modern life. These are human beings. When you drop a bomb, not you, sorry. When someone drops a bomb on a neighborhood, it kills people. It kills innocent people. It kills children. And these are all human beings. They all have individual rights and dignity. And many of them are totally innocent of any crime against the person dropping the bomb or the state dropping the bomb. In the 20th century, a century whose story is largely one of modernist mass murder, competing forms of collectivism, death camps and gulags, there's one institution that I think is still neglected. There's one trend that is still ignored. The U.S. emerged in the 20th century as the most bomb-happy regime ever. I mean, think of all of the people the U.S. bombed in the last 100 years. In World War II, something like over 60 cities in Japan destroyed. In Germany, it was more than 100. In Korea, Truman he targeted civilian dams purposely to kill a million or more Koreans through drownings and floods. He dropped thousands of pounds of ordnance, millions of gallons of napalm in what is truly the forgotten war. And in Vietnam, of course, we know that the estimates of how many people were killed by the bombings ranges, but it's somewhere likely 1, 2, 3 million. It's really tragic to have to say that the rate of death is somewhere between 1 and 3 million. But at any rate, does it occur to people that this is about as many innocent people as Pol Pot killed? I mean, this is a very significant thing. And, at least intellectually, on the left, or on the right, there's this understanding, there's this learning that we had from the 20th century. We've learned a lot of lessons about totalitarianism, about Nazism, fascism, communism. But what about bombing? What about strategic bombing? The whole thing really has to be rethought, because it seems to me to be qualitatively on the same scale of totally dismissing the individual's rights for the collective good. And people defend it. They say, well, they'll either say, well, that did bring about a greater good, just as some people still defend Lenin and